My name is Aisha. I'm 48 years old now, but the story I'm going to tell you happened when I was in high school. My parents were constantly traveling for work, and it was hard for them to leave me alone for so long. So they thought it would be nice to send me to a Catholic boarding school in the city of Campeche for a few months. During my stay at the monastery, some of the nuns who gave us lessons were very nice people, but others, such as the abbess, did not want to have problems with her. We were all afraid of her because she was too strict and imposed some kind of punishment. Harsh, but we didn't follow the rules. In those days, everything was different. Our parents allowed us to apply these punishments because at that time they were brainwashed by religion. I had a group of 4 friends with whom I had a lot of fun. One of them, Rocio, was the craziest of them all. Sometimes she convinced us that we shouldn't be so cruel because we didn't have one. We left the dormitory at night and went to the backyard of the monastery where there was an abandoned dormitory. No one ever went there. The place was dark and far from the rooms where the female members of the monastery slept. However, all 4 of us were in the monastery on duty and tired of being locked up every day. We listened to her all day, and from time to time we gathered in the evenings to drink beer, which the elder sister Rocio secretly brought to visit her. On one of these evenings, we were quietly chatting, laughing and drinking outside this abandoned building when suddenly Sophia, another of my friends, stopped laughing and fell silent, staring at me intently in the window of this building. She told us that the girls could see her. We all turned, and in the weak light reflected from the moon, we are sure that what we saw was a nun watching us with rapt eyes. But what I saw right away was her smile, so wide. She seemed to be making a huge effort to keep that expression, as if she were a nun. He was most excited that he found us, but more than that, it was an expression of anger. Our only reaction was to run out of our bedroom. We left bottles and all traces of our escape in that place. We were very scared because we knew that we would be punished, and they would call our parents, and they might even kick us out. We tried to find an excuse the next day, but we didn't know which woman was the one we didn't see because the face we saw didn't look like any nun in the monastery. The next day we were already ready for punishment and sermons, but no one saw us. I called. No one paid attention to us. It was as if nothing had happened. We were surprised because we knew the severity of the situation. 1, for being outside after hours, and 2, and the most serious, because I was drinking alcohol. So the days passed, and my friend Rocio, she convinced us to go out again in the evening, this time without alcohol, but to have a good time, since we had a lot of time not to do it from that time, and we were sure that the nun who saw us was right. He overlooked it and didn't blame us. It sounds stupid, but we listened to and we went back to that building. But for some reason, that night the air got colder. The atmosphere was heavy. I couldn't stop shivering, and I felt a sense of longing. We all agreed to feel the strange atmosphere in this place. We were just discussing it when we heard a noise coming from an abandoned building, as if someone was slamming the door. I was dying of fear, but Rocio tried to calm us down by saying that it was an animal. So, how safe I was. There were broken windows where they could easily climb. But Erica, another friend of mine, was not convinced. She told us to go see what could be fun. I told them they were crazy if they thought we were going to go in there. It was barely noticeable. But yes, in the end, they convinced me. Besides, I didn't want to be alone on the street. It was even scarier for me. We entered the door, which was next to where we were sitting. I was walking at the end, holding Du's hand. We slowly opened the door. It was barely visible in the weak natural light. Coming in from the courtyard, everything was fine and I didn't know where to go. But in the end, they convinced me, filled with dirt, dead insects, old furniture, garbage, and a putrid smell. We climbed the terribly creaking stairs. Since the noise was coming from the second floor, we entered a room where there were old beds. Everything was very dirty. It seemed that it was a nun's bedroom, since there were many crucifixes and old rosaries on the wall above the furniture. However, I could see that there was writing on the wall in another language with characters unknown to me. The crosses had a slightly different shape than we know. This was the room where we saw Jesus Christ. The nun was watching us from the window. I was getting more and more nervous. I just wanted them to finish their adventure and get out of there. We left this bedroom and went to the main corridor, where there were more rooms. Rocio and Sophia separated to go down to the first floor to inspect it. I stayed with Erica, who didn't want to come down because she wanted to see what was at the other doors. As we were leaving the room, we heard footsteps coming from the last bedroom. Erica and I thought it was our friends who got up again. So we looked out into the hallway, but in the background, where it was almost completely dark, a nun was watching us intently. I could barely make out her silhouette, but I could recognize the same smile that saw us that night, full of anger with an anxious look. Her face did not express the horror that made us freeze in place, just looking straight into the nun's face, not knowing who she was, and how could it happen that such a thing came from her. Heavy and negative energy. I just kept looking, without moving, without stopping smiling. It was the scariest expression I've ever seen in my entire life. I do not know where I got the courage, but I managed to react, and I grabbed Erica's hand to escape from there, and we ran down the stairs, shouting to our two friends who were downstairs. They didn't know what was going on, but they could see our scared faces and realized that something was very wrong. The four of us came out of there and ran straight to our bedroom when we came across a nun who was one of the most beloved and was surprised to ask us what we were doing outside at those hours. And before I mentioned the punishment, I think that he could see the fear that was on our faces. Erica didn't hesitate for a second, interrupting her, telling her what happened and what we saw in that building. The nun, with an expression of surprise and fear on her face, asked, "Did you go in there?" We answered yes and told her everything that happened. His face became paler and paler while he listened. He said nothing and just silently took us to our bedroom. Upon arrival, he told us that he was going to tell us what happened there almost 40 years ago when he first entered, and that he would only do this so that we would never approach this building again. Not to mention that at night, when I entered the monastery, there lived a nun named Carmen, who lived here for a long time. She was somewhat lonely when she needed to talk to someone. She only said what was necessary, did not meet anyone, and at mealtime we never saw her almost all the time. She wrote somewhere where no one has seen her. One day, in the building where there used to be a dormitory for all the sisters, including me, animal sounds were heard in her dormitory, as if there were goats and pigs. That night, we all suspected what was going on, and when we went to the house where all the sisters lived, knocked on her door and asked if everything was okay and what those sounds were. It was quiet. We tried to open the door, but it was locked, when suddenly there was a devilish laugh and language inside which we couldn't understand. It was something we'd never heard. Every time they got louder, it was something frightening. We all grabbed our rosaries and began to pray, while the abbess found the key to this room. The laughter became louder and more mocking. When they finally managed to open the door, Sister Carmen was next to us and we heard her hanging in the closet. We couldn't do anything more for her. It was already too late, but what scared us most was a pentagon painted in blood on the floor with a lot of guards around and a book right in the middle. Outright occultism. The sister held satanic sessions in her room every night, and it seems that everything got out of control that night. After Sister Carmen was buried, this room was abandoned. No one dared to interfere with this, as every night they heard a noise there, from footsteps to eerie laughter. The other sisters began to leave the room after Sister Carmen was buried, building and constructing new bedrooms here where there used to be a warehouse. Before I realized that it was just me and another sister who slept there. We believed that with such great faith, we had nothing to fear, until one evening when I went down for a glass of water. I didn't see her. I saw her staring. She looked at me with such big black eyes, but with such a devilish and evil smile, that to this day I continue to see her. With my eyes closed, I immediately recognized my sister, but with the energy coming from her, I saw that she was looking at me with such big black eyes, but with such a devilish hue. From that I knew that I was not Carmen, that it was inhuman. In the way she looked at me, I knew that if I'm not leaving, something much worse is going to happen. I rushed upstairs to the other sister's room and we ran out to inform the abbess of the one who told us that she too, I've seen her before and recognized her. That something very bad lives in this building.